Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Gwinnett County Public Library in partnership with UGA Gwinnett Extension for our fall planting workshop. My name is Miriam Mayer, and I work for Gwinnett County Public Library's Adult Services Department. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping rules. Tonight's workshop is a webinar, so you will only have a view of our speaker. Your mics have been muted. Tim will be doing a Q&A at the end of the workshop, so if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for tonight's workshop. Tim Daly is the Horticulture and Environmental Agent at UGA Extension Gwinnett. He manages agricultural and natural resources programs in Gwinnett County by teaching educational programs in forestry, horticulture, landscape management, and water conservation. Please welcome Tim Daly.
All right, well, I'm honored to be giving this presentation for everybody. Glad that you could all join us. Fall is for planting. Well, fall, I know it's been kind of warm, but fall is coming. You know, the weather's going to be getting colder over the next few days. So fall is here, pretty much. We'll have some dry days. I know it's felt like we've had so much rain lately. Anyhow, why is fall a good time? When to plant trees and shrubs? Fall is the best time of the year. Although the top parts of the plants have slowed down or have stopped growing during the winter months, their roots continue to grow and helps the plant become established. In the following summer, the plant is more resistant to the heat and drought conditions. That's basically trees, shrubs, and perennials. You'll be getting rid of your summer vegetables and putting your fall vegetables in, summer annuals, and getting rid of them and putting in your winter annuals like your pansies. Now, when you're purchasing the plants, you need to get good, healthy plants. On the right side, if you look at the pots, on the right side is what you're looking for. You need to have roots that are growing throughout the plant that are healthy, light white or light brown, cream colored. Now the one on the left, the roots aren't that healthy. They're not growing through the plant that well. I have seen cases where I've gone to try to pull a plant off, a plant to see what the roots look like, and the top part of the plant just breaks off. So obviously that's not what you want. You want to have a good, healthy root system like this. That's what you want. Good, healthy, nice looking roots like that. Now also, you want to see how your soil's like. Oh, if you dig a hole, maybe 8 to 10, 12 inches below ground and fill it up with water, it should drain out within 8 hours. If not, then that's a sign your soil has got poor drainage. What you can do is amend the soil, put peat moss, topsoil, compost, and till up the soil with a rotor tiller. That's what you need to do. Now, you don't want to just dig a hole and put soil amendments in the individual hole. I'll talk about that in just a second, but that's what you need to do to help with or you can plant plants that like more water, that can handle wet situations. This is a very important, more plants are killed in Georgia from too much water than from lack of water. People find that puzzling, even in drought situations. Many years ago, I had a former employer told me the key is to not know when to water, but when not to water. So more plants are killed in Georgia from too much water than lack of water. So you need to really make sure. Some years ago, I had a landscaper called me up and said he had a slope, shore junipers in full sun. What that meant is, he says, well, he doesn't understand why they're dying there in full sun. Junipers like full sun and well-drained soil. It's on a slope. Ask the man how often he waters. He says an hour and a half every day. He's been doing that for 2 weeks. Obviously, that's way more water than the plants need. So I went and I pulled one of those brown dead junipers out, and the hole was full of water. That's what we're trying to avoid. Solutions to wet site and on elevated beds, break apart a hard pan layer, select plants that are adapted to wet sites. I'll show you all some of that later. Install subsurface drainage like French drains. Those are ways to help wet sites. Planting procedures, proper planting procedures is very important for plants. Planting them properly. Pretty important, especially with the bulb and burlap plants, but as well as for container plants, there's wire or cord wrapped around the base of the trunk. You need to cut that, because if not, that growth, as it continues out, it'll girdle or strangle the plant. And I've seen many cases of that happening. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So just cut that back. Bulb and burlap, pull the burlap off as much as you can get off. And pull that down. And a lot of these burlaps are biodegradable, but just try to get as much off. Try to get it out of the wire cage if, real big ones. It's the best thing to do. Sometimes that's not possible. That's for the professionals. And get that plant into the ground. Now, some plants roots are pot bound. That means you got excessive amount of roots growing around the root ball, and they're not. What happens is that's going to discourage them from growing out and probing into the soil, and that can eventually cause the plant to decline and die. So what you need to do is to go with a knife or razor blade, make fork cuts on pot bound plants. That's what you need to do. Go around and do that on 4 or more cuts to break up those roots, maybe pull them off some, and that makes it more viable to grow out into the soil nearby. Just never put a $100 tree into a $2 hole. That sounds funny, but that's true. You want to make sure it's because a lot of these, you got to make sure it's being planted into something that the plant can handle. We talked about soil amendments. Do not place any type of soil amendment such as peat moss, compost, manure, anything like that inside in a hole. You just dig out the regular soil and refill with that regular soil. Now, let's say you got several trees or shrubs that you're doing it. You can till up an area and add soil amendments, but you need to do it for the whole area and till it up, but not just for individual holes. All right. You see, the thing is right here. The thing is that you want to, if you put soil amendments in, it will encourage the water will have trouble draining out. It can cause the water. Also, the roots will be less likely to want to explore out the soil around it. So just use that. Basically, what you need to do is dig the hole 2 to 3 times the size of the root ball, and no deeper than the top of the root ball. That's very important. No deeper than the top. And even if it sticks out about ½ an inch or so, that's fine. Too deep, and you could potentially get it could potentially drown the plant and cause a root rot. Place it in the hole, and it's showing you right here is why, because if it's the same depth as a root ball, no settling occurs. I mentioned if it's planted deeper, it will have settling, and stem damage can also occur. So we're trying to avoid that. An example of something that was planted too deep. As you can see, the bottom roots is what's normal, but those higher ups are adventitious roots, and that started to form. That can create problems. In fact, this plant was lucky it did that. Usually they die. And you want to try to avoid that. By the way, just keep typing your questions in the chat box. I see a couple, and we'll get to them after the program. Cover it up, pack it down good with that soil that you that have previously removed, and water it in good. Make sure it gets plenty of water while it's getting established. Once we get into the cold weather, of course, right now with all the rain, we don't, but rain stops, make sure it gets watered in. And once we get into the cold weather, you really don't have to water it. Nature will take care of that for us. Mulch is a very good idea. Pine straw, pine bark, cypress mulch, a fine organic texture mulch, fine textured organic mulch. Anywhere from 2 to 4 inches on top of the soil. It has many benefits that it reduces compaction, holds water in the soil so it doesn't dry out. It keeps weeds down. And also it's for the aesthetics. It looks nice. The example of pine straw. Especially on a slope, pine straws are good. Pine bark might wash off. Now here's a situation where you got too much mulch on a root ball. This is up like maybe a foot or more, and that's bad. It'll smother it'll cause rot on the tree trunk and smother the roots. So it should be no more than 2 to 4 inches, and pull it back away from the trunk a few inches. That's what you're looking for. This is excessive. And yes, it's at one of Gwinnett Parks. And when I found out about it, I made a phone call. I know them guys over there. It's too much. See all that soil piled up? You should put no more than 2 to 3 inches of soil on top of the root zone. Any more than that will smother the roots and cause the tree to decline. I see this a lot on construction sites. Marble, gravel, or lava rock do not put out, because what that does is it absorbs heat and can cook the plants during the summer months. So avoid putting that out. Now, if you're growing cacti and desert plants, you'd be okay to do that. But other than that, don't put that. I see this a lot. Avoid putting that out. Well, people ask me about staking and using guy wires. Well, that can be done on some of the trees to help them from being blown over by wind as they try to get rooted. That's fine, but you gotta monitor those guy wires and that rope. That as that tree grows, it could potentially girdle it further up where those ropes and wires come around those branches up there. This is an example of what I'm talking about. You don't want to get to this point. This was on some upscale properties somewhere in this city that I know a lot of money had been spent to put in these trees, and I knew the company that had done that. I contacted the company, and a lady answered the phone, and I said, on such and such property, the guy wires are girdling the trees. You need to get somebody. And she's like, well, who are you? I said, hey, just a concerned citizen. That's what I said. But you really need to get that out there, get that stuff off. A couple of days I drove by there and they pulled it off. But I tell our landscape, our professionals, that you don't need people calling in. This is something that should be monitored. And as well as a homeowner monitors. We try to avoid that. That hurts the plant. See this tree right here? It's a Leyland cypress. Don't get me started on Leyland cypress. It's going downhill. So I decided to do a little, I like that old TV show, Dragnet. I'm Joe Friday, Sergeant Friday, doing detective work. What's wrong with this tree? That's what's wrong with it. It's fertile. That's what you're trying to avoid. You don't want girdling of the tree, because once it gets to that point, there's no saving it. And this other tree on the right was already girdled, and I was able to pull that off. Also, I have seen situations on Leyland on trees, in particular Leyland cypress. I noticed the top half of the plant's dying, but the bottom half looks okay, and it's the wires that have girdled it higher up. Interesting, one time I saw that as a Zaxby's restaurant somewhere around here. And I told the manager about that and showed him. And he said, "Do you think you can get them off? Can they get?" I said, "Yeah, pretty easy." And I had the wire cutters. He says, "You cut them off, I'll give you a free meal." And that's what I did. I saved his Leyland cypress trees. Although I think they all ought to be chainsawed down. I'm not a fan of Leyland cypress. They plant them too close together and other things. Mention about one inch of water per week in lieu of rain. That water needs to get deep down into the root zone. It doesn't, you see that? Not just up at the upper layer of the soil, upper couple inches, deep down below into those root zones. So it'll get the roots growing pretty good. Water it long enough to get down that deep. Once or twice a week in lieu of rain, not just little shallow waterings, a good deep watering. Sometimes if you get a hose and just stand over it and water it for a few minutes, you'll accomplish that. Drip irrigation is what, things like that. I talk to professionals about irrigation zones. Now, another thing you have to take into consideration is spacing of the trees. Spacing of the plants. A lot of times they're planted too close together and it grows into this huge mess. That's bad for multiple reasons. One thing is the plants are competing for nutrients, light. Also, it's more prevalent for pests. You see how close that is to the house? That can increase moisture, leading to mold. Also, pest problems like your roaches, ants, rodents, even termites, and also human pests, as burglars can go through that window where they're not. So you want to avoid that at all costs. These are Leyland cypress trees. It looks like about 4 of them planted on the side of the wall. Now, these in Georgia can get up to 50, 60 feet high and 20 feet long when they're at maximum maturity. And in Britain, they get up to 100, but they don't get that high here. Now, you see, that is a poor choice to be planted here. Obviously, these things are going to need to be cut down. So, I express it is a very similar presentation I give called The Right Plant for the Right Place. I do that with professionals as much as homeowners, and I don't think it's soaking in with a lot of professionals. All right, you see these crepe myrtles here? The problem is with these crepe myrtles is that they're planted too close together, too many. Realistically, should they have this one here, this one here, this one should not be here, this one. And you see the ones on the backs and the ones on the fronts, but these ones in the middle should not be planted. They should go and open up that area. And also, I always tell people to spray out the grass and put pine straw there so they don't have to worry about mowing around it. Now this one, I hate to say it, this mess is at down in Griffin on the UGA campus. It's the headquarters of the extension where our Northwest District of Extension is located. Now we had nothing to do with this design or this planting or anything, but you see all this plants growing in, more is not better. You need to think about how big that plant is when it grows up. Those of you with children, little babies can grow up to a pretty good size adult. I can attest for that. I have a 23-year-old nephew. I remember when he was just a baby, my godson, and he's getting ready to get married in a couple of weeks. He's pretty big now. He's grown up. Well, think about plants. They're like children. They grow up. All right, this is blue Atlas cedar. They can get up to 50, 60 feet tall, width of 20 feet. Has planted on a parking lot island at some Chick-fil-A. Now that is an idiotic thing to plant there because that thing is going to outgrow that island very quick. Poor choice of plants. It shouldn't even be there. Some of these little shrubs are all right, might do okay, but not that. See, I don't mean to bash landscape architects. They've gotten better over the years. A lot of us don't understand plants. although that has gotten significantly better over the years. Avoid planting troublesome plants. Some plants are nothing but trouble. We'll show some of them we all know, the old Bradford pears. I think everybody's familiar with this tree. Can't stand them. They have weak, soft wood, and it grows very rapidly. So you get these V-shaped crotches, very narrow angles, and all that limbs and weight on it, and it breaks off. Especially when we have windstorms. You always see that. When I worked in commercial landscaping, I cannot tell you how many Bradford pears I had to chainsaw out from under vehicles the vehicles were trapped under there. So lesson, don't ever park your car under a Bradford pear tree. But then saw it up, those on your property, you should get rid of them. And for heaven's sakes, don't plant them. Also, those blooms, while beautiful, have a bad odor to them. Some people find offensive. I used to think that their plants were sterile, but they hybridize with other pear trees, and they become quite invasive. So you see these big thickets of Bradford pear trees, often those ones have thorns. So Bradford pears are something you want to stay away from. If you have them, get rid of them. This is the red tip photinias. Very popular back in the 70s, 80s, but a leaf spot disease. Normally leaf spot disease will not kill a plant, but it does with the red tips. The same thing is harming, it causes the Indian hawthorns to decline. Those are two plants you should not have. I don't think I have a picture of the Indian hawthorns, but what it does is it drops the leaves and the leaves with the fungus, rain and wind blow it back on the plant. Now, a tree form red tip, this tree, it doesn't have branches on the lower part of the tree, usually does better. But this is something there's plenty of other like hollies that you can plant as a screen. This is cotoneaster, which I don't see as much of this anymore. Spider mites and lace bugs chew it up. Bad thing to have. And of course, it doesn't, with all that, it's kind of thin growing and weeds come up in it. This is the cherry trees. I get a lot of calls about cherry trees. Basically, we have the Yoshinos. They're the pretty ones that are white in the spring. The Kwanzans, which are kind of pinkish, that have sort of multi-petal flowers. The Okamis they're usually the first ones to bloom in the spring. And another one called autumnalis. These, they're really not adapted to our areas. Now, up in DC, they thrive, but not down here for multiple reasons. First of all, it's the hot temperatures and humidity, but also our soils. The clay acidic soils, they prefer more alkaline soils. So really, that in time, cherry trees will decline. Sometimes they happen rapidly. Sometimes they can last 20 or 30 years. It just depends on the trees. Most of the ones I see don't last that long. You start seeing this dying because pests and fungal diseases are getting into it because it's declining. It's not suited for this area. If you have one, you might want to extend. It might help a little bit if you get some dolomitic limestone, which you can purchase at the garden center and spread out under the drip line. Evenly broadcast it. That might help it. But no promises there. So I would say avoid planting cherry trees. Crab apples, crepe myrtles, fringe trees would be a far better choice to do better in our area. Here's one. 80% of plant problems result from the inability of the plant to tolerate or adapt to the environment. Back to the right plant for the right place. Very important. Can it adapt? You gotta have something that's going to adapt to the environment. We have these these are our USDA hardiness zones. We're in zone 7B in Gwinnett. Now, some plants we're too far south, they won't grow, and other plants were too far north. Select plants adapt to the site and the local environmental conditions. This is in Alberta spruce. Had a man send me this picture. He said he planted this 2 years ago and they're going downhill. Has spider mites and other problems. Why is it going downhill? Why is it not doing well? The name gives it away, Alberta spruce. They thrive up in Alberta, but not in Georgia. Usually those spruces and firs, they're not going to do well down here. Up in those very cold areas, they thrive, but not down here, they won't. So avoid planting them. There's another spruce tree. I took this picture by a church up there in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I went up there about 2 years ago for our national meeting before COVID. And these things thrive up here, but down here, they don't do that well. I mean, I've seen them here and there, but they don't do that well. You would see spruces, firs all over the place. Now, if you look at that grass, that's another thing. That's Kentucky bluegrass. It thrives up there, but down here it's too hot for that kind of grass. So, you know, traveling, you see all sorts of interesting things in other parts of the country. Dogwood trees, common dogwoods, which is native to our area, but I always emphasize this. If it's native, doesn't mean it can grow anywhere. Common dogwoods are native, they're understory trees. They need shade or part shade. In the full sun, especially near pavement, they decline. This dogwood right here, as you can see, it's dying back. The branches are dying. If you look at toward the bottom of the tree, you see it suckering out. It's stressed. It's probably got diseases and insect problems too. Also to point out, dogwoods are short-lived trees. They only live about 20, 25, maybe 30 years at the most. It depends on the tree, and then they die. They're not real long-lived like oaks, but they live longer in the shade. Now, there's another type of dogwood that's not native called a kusa or Korean dogwood. It blooms about 2 weeks after our common dogwoods, and it can grow in full sun. But remember, if you have a common dogwood, it needs part shade. Hydrangeas, we know about hydrangeas. They like shady areas and moist soil. Some yahoo decided to put this on a parking lot island in the middle of July. They didn't last but a few days. They were cooked. This is what hydrangeas like. They like shaded area, you know, semi-shade and moist organic soil. These hydrangeas are happy. These didn't last very long. These are thriving. Azaleas also like to have they like to have partial shade. This is taken at Stone Mountain, taken up in a shaded area, partially shaded areas. That's what azaleas need. Now, you always say that having a healthy plant helps it more resistant to pests. Azaleas, there's an insect called a lace bug that gets on them. It's a little small insect that gets on the underside of the leaves. It's a pure sucking mouth part and sucks the juices out of the leaves and causes this ugly yellow chlorosis, it's called. Underneath the leaves are black spots of their excrement. If they're in full sun, the lace bugs are far worse than if they're in shade, because in full sun, the plants are stressed and not able to resist them. Some plants require more care than others. Ideal low maintenance plants has moderate growth rates, few pest problems, produces no messy fruits, pods, or shedding branches. No landscape plant is perfect. Choose those with the fewest flaws. You know, some trees are messy. They drop a lot, like river birches. They drop lots of leaves and branches. You don't want that in areas where, like, around patios and porches and driveways and walkways and places like that. And heaven forbid a swimming pool. We all know about the sweet gums, dropping those little sticky seed pods. I've had people say, well, is there a variety that doesn't produce as much? They say they don't produce any. Well, there's no such thing. Some might produce less than others. And so I also had a call, can you spray it with something to keep it from producing? No. Another one that's real messy are the sycamores. It's really best not to plant those. Now, river birches are used a lot, but if you plant it in a natural area where the leaves and the branches aren't going to cause a problem, that's fine. Crepe myrtles are very healthy. They thrive in our area. They need to have full sun, but they thrive. Now, some crepe myrtles, the powdery mildew in particular is a fungal disease that gets on them and deforms the flowers and causes the leaves to turn white. Some varieties of crepe myrtles are resistant, especially those with the Indian name like Natchez, Arapaho, Muskogee. They're really low maintenance. And I know people want to prune them in the winter, really don't even need to prune them. But if you do, just remove some of the branches that are crisscrossing and growing inward. Don't butcher them. If you butcher them, that makes them more susceptible to insects and disease, that they're not as healthy. Japanese cryptomerias, alternative to Leyland cypress, if they're spaced apart appropriately. They have this pyramidal shape, and they really don't, and they have very few pest problems. So sometimes their branches will die, though. Especially if we have a cold snap, you might get that, but it needs full sun. Shade, you'll have dieback. This is a good one. Chase tree, Vitex, which produces purple, light bluish flowers. There's a variety that has white and pink flowers. Very low maintenance. Doesn't really have any pest problems. It needs the full sun, basically. But once you plant that, you have to prune. You might need to prune it up a little here and there, but it doesn't have. It's low maintenance. Few pest problems. Doesn't have any real pest problems. Carolina jessamine, which is a vine, it's native to Georgia. It has yellow flowers, blooms in the spring, early spring. They're native. They grow both in shade and sun, and easy to grow. Really easy. They don't need a lot of maintenance, although you might want to trim them up some. Any of these ornamental grasses like pampas grass, miscanthus, fountain grass, once they're established, they're easy to maintain. They don't have a lot of pests. They don't require much water. A lot of times in late winter, people will cut them back to the ground to allow for the new growth. But some of these, you might want to make sure you have some thick gloves and sleeves on, because they have like a saw-like leaves that can cut you. Beware. Anise plant, Elysium floridanum. They have a real light. They sort of have a light green foliage. There's some varieties where they're more whiter in color, more yellow in color, very attractive. They produce these white flowers. They're very easy to grow, minimal maintenance. They make nice hedges and privacy barriers. There's another type called the Florida anise plants that's more adapted to wetter areas. They have the red flowers. Leary oak is another one that grows good. It grows good in sun and shade. Good alternative to lawns, but it can be a little invasive, so you have to watch it. But it's easy to grow. Abelias, there's many different types of abelias. They can handle sun and semi-shade. They're easy to, another one that's easy to grow. There's many different types, variegated kinds with pinkish, different colored flowers. There are a lot that you can, there's several, but they're easy to grow once they're established. Redbud versus canadensis is a native tree that can get up to 20 feet tall. It has the heart-shaped leaves and produces lavender flowers, pink lavender flowers in the spring. There's a variety called Alba that produces white flowers. They have these heart-shaped leaves, and a variety called forest pansy has purple. The leaves turn purple once they leaf out. Chinese pistache is a tree that does handle wet areas and is very easy to maintain. They produce very attractive orange-red foliage in the fall. They're underutilized. This is a good tree to plant. As I said, it's not as much planted as they should be, but this is a good plant. Low maintenance. That's what I emphasize. You don't want something you got to maintain. Daylilies, talking about herbaceous perennials, they're great. They need to have still sun or mostly full sun, but once they're established, they take off. There's many different types of daylilies. Now, above this is if you have wet areas. Above average tolerance to moist sites. Weeping willows, black willows, red maples, bald cypress. Well, you know bald cypress, they grow in swamps. Yaupon, dwarf yaupon hollies, sweet bay magnolias, wax myrtles, Virginia sweetspire and clethra. They kind of look alike a little bit. They have these bottle brush-like flowers or fluorescences, they're called. Certain types of iris and ornamental grasses. You know, some irises can grow in water. They're used in water on fish ponds. Some do not tolerate wet sites or extreme fluctuations. Junipers. Of course, junipers, I really don't like junipers. That's personal opinion. They need to have well-drained soil and full sun. Azaleas and camellias are also like that. Those Japanese cryptomerias. Of course, the Leyland cypress, if it gets too dry, they suffer. If it's too wet, they suffer. Ornamental cherries, we know why that they don't do well. Hellerii hollies and winter daphne. Those are beautiful plants, but they sort of have a limited life expectancy. That is a beautiful shrub in my front yard that died. They're real picky. Daphnes, once you plant them, you don't want to transplant them. But those are some right there. So just know what you plant. And basically, in a nutshell, you want the right plant in the right place, and now's the time to put them out. The fall and into the early winter is because, again, their roots, once you plant them, as it gets cold, their roots the top parts will hardly grow at all, but the bottom, the roots will grow slowly. They're insulated in the soil, and they're better established for next summer. So it'll help the heat. Now, there's my email address, contact information, just in case you want to. This is for just if you want to comment on the video and everything and how well it was done and so forth. I will go ahead and get some answer questions. All right. Yeah. Hi, Lee. What you said about checking to see the area is plant too wet. Okay. Dig a hole about 8 to 12 feet, 12 inches deep. Fill it up with water, and if it's good, it should drain out within 8 hours. If not, that means the soil has poor drainage. What else do you besides amendments besides mulch? Well, really, you can buy, of course, you can buy stuff at the stores, you know, bags of things. There's also luxury landscape, and down in Lawrenceville over off Hurricane, near Highway 20 and Collins Hill Road. There's Bryson's Trucking and Landscape Supplies on Killian Hill, right near Lilburn Industrial Boulevard, south of 29. And there's other places you can buy. Suckers planted from Japanese maple every turn to the reddish. Will the leaves of suckers planted from? Yes, they will. The burning bush, good plant for this area, absolutely. Very good plant for this area. There's my contact information. What you can do is you contact, email's probably better. Send me a pictures by email if you have like plant identifications, pest problems, questions. That works. I get a lot in. And somebody says they're burning bushes are beautiful. We live in Stone Mountain. Well, that's great. Yeah, they'll be coming in as soon. If you have additional questions or things you think of, contact me. Also, that ugaextension.org/Gwinnett, we have some of our upcoming plans. Appreciate it.